All right. So we will begin by.
Your sound's not on.
Oh,
Sound's not on.
it's on. Yeah. Can you guys not hear me?
No, your sound is not very well.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I just
Now
need to
it's
speak
on.
in my second voice. That's all. So we will begin with roll call.
Trustee Hack,
I'm here.
Trustee Hernandez,
Here.
Trustee Rocha,
Here.
Vice President Lathan,
Here.
President Lewis.
Here. All right. So we will have the flag salute. Trustee Hernandez, would you mind leading us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you. All right. So next up is approval of minutes for the regular Board of Education meeting of August 23rd, 2023.
I move approval.
Okay. I have a motion on the floor for approval. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. I have a motion and proper second. Any discussion? All right. So a motion and proper second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? The motion carries. All right, item D, approval of minutes for the regular Board of Education meeting of September 13th, 2023.
I so move.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a proper second?
Second.
All right, so a motion on the floor properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. E, approval of minutes for the special Board of Education meeting of September 21st, 2021. Any
Move
dis-
approval.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor for approval.
Gotcha.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion on the floor properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? The motion carries. All right, next up is the superintendent reports.
Yes, good evening. So we had a couple of very successful events last night. We had a college and career fair open to all students that was held at Antioch High School. We had approximately 200 families that attended that. We had 45 representatives from colleges, local business, and also the military there if people wanted to learn more about that. We also had our pathway selection night for all eighth graders in the district. Hundreds of families also attended that last night. That was at Deer Valley High School. And if any of our families missed that and they have an eighth grade student, there is tomorrow night, there's one at Antioch High School in the Beatty Auditorium from 7 to 9. So we welcome you there. Equity audits are going well. We've had completed Carmen Dragon, Marsh Elementary, and Antioch High School, and I believe today they're at Sutter Elementary. So looking forward to those reports in about 6 weeks, I believe, which we'll share with the board. Day of Empowerment was a great success. We had approximately 700 eighth grade girls at the fairgrounds with 8 panelists, a keynote speaker. There was an opportunity for students to do Q&A of the panelists and also to meet in small groups to discuss some thought-provoking quotes and questions and really just to bond together. So a great event, and special thank you to Antioch Rotary and specifically to Sal Sabranti, who's part of the Rotary, who gets the middle school principals together once a month, every month, for a year in preparation of this, and does a lot of behind the scenes. So thank you to him. And finally, I let the board know we have a groundbreaking of finally the Deer Valley High School turf. That is October 30th, yay, at 10 a.m. And I hope you can all attend. And anyone else who's listening or watching, we would welcome you as well. That's my report for this evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments for the superintendent's report? Okay. Thank you. Next up is the high school representatives report.
Good evening, Board of Education and members of our community. Our names are Brianna Fumar. I'm the ASB president and president of CSF at Dozier.
And I am Matilda McCarthy. I am the senior class president, and I'm also the BSU secretary. And we are here representing Dozier Libby Medical High School. Go Diamondbacks. What a year we have been having. It is hard to believe it is already the end of October. The first quarter at DLMHS brought numerous campus-wide events for all students to participate in, such as our walkthrough event before school started, the Welcome Back event, which is part of a movie and then a DJ and lots of dancing, And then we also host our monthly Lunch on the Lawn in August, which is also with our Club Rush, our Hispanic Heritage Celebration with Hermoso Cultura, performing several folklorico dances in September. And next week will be our October Lunch on the Lawn, which includes our annual costume contest.
You may be thinking, wow, that's a lot to keep track of. And yes, it is a lot. But thankfully, we have weekly announcements that take place on Mondays called The Pulse, where leadership students head to advisory to talk about upcoming events for the week and answer any questions students or staff may have. We also put a monthly activity calendar, which you guys have with you. We have 2 copies out, for teachers to post in their classrooms for students to reference. Our newest source of news on campus is also the Dose of Dozier, which we have out for you as well, which is a monthly newspaper put out by the students for the students. As a part of the newspaper, students are highlighted by different achievements. 2 athletes highlighted were Julia and Kelechi, both who are athletes of Antioch High School. Dozier Libby has several Diamondbacks who play for sports at the other 2 high schools. This is not only an opportunity for sports at Dozier Libby. We have several intramural events throughout the year. Last month, we finished our badminton tournament and have now started our 3-on-3 basketball tournament taking place in the gym after school.
Student achievement is the result of dedication, hard work, and commitment to learning. It reflects students' determination to reach their full potential and the guidance and support they receive from educators, parents, and the school community. Currently, we have around 700 distinguished Diamondbacks working on attaining our vitals, which state that every graduate will be verbal, intellectual, technological, academic, and a leader.
At the end of our last grading period, 35% of the student body had over a 3.5 GPA, with 16% of the student body having over a 4.0. Hard work and dedication pays off. Students of Dozier Libby have access to so many resources to help with academics. Math tutoring takes place every Tuesday and Thursday, and we have physics tutoring as well that takes place once a week. Advisory classes are used to make up tests, get assistance from teachers on assignments. Additionally, teachers also do weekly grade checks on Mondays. Students with no Ds or Fs receive early release to lunch, and students with Ds and Fs can receive additional support from their advisory teachers. At Dozier Libby, we study hard, but we also leave time to have fun too.
Dozier Libby is the medical pathway high school of AUSD. Currently, several students from Mrs. O'Leary's sports medicine class are helping at different sporting events at Antioch High School and Deer Valley High School, wrapping ankles or splinting sprained fingers. Students from our first responder class participated in an extraction exercise performed in our student parking lot, where Ms. Medell and Mr. Brown used their cars in the simulation. Students and first responders used their skills to help extract car victims, while AP Spanish students worked on using medical terminology in Spanish. This is the first of several events put on by first responders. The next event will be a mass casualty incident, MCI for short, to take place in the next month or 2.
Medical ethics students recently worked with the DA's office and their crime scene program for their integrated project, CLUE. Medical ethics students will soon be going to San Quentin Penitentiary to tour the medical facilities on December 12th. Public Health 1, 2, and 3 is an elective class on our campus. Students become members of the professional organization called HOSA, which stands for Health Occupational Students of America. Students learn about the different health professions, enhance their teamwork skills, and develop their leadership skills. Dozier Libby HOSA has a long-standing history of participating in the State Leadership Conference and being invited to participate in the International Leadership Conference. To prepare for these events, HOSA must organize unique events on campus, such as HOSA Week, which is coming up, which will allow 700 students at Dozier Libby to become CPR trained. East Bay Regional Parks will be certifying HOSA members as CPR instructors who will then train their fellow students on campus. Thank you for allowing us to come and share information about our campus with you this evening.
We would also like to extend a personal invitation to each of you to the Dozier Libby campus to see our amazing school in person. We also have, as a token of our appreciation, some hand sanitizers and lanyards and stickers in there for you guys to appreciate and enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's always great to hear from our young people. I can officially say that now. I have a couple gray hairs, so I've been waiting a long time. So thank you for coming and presenting. Next up, we have public comments. So individuals to address the board regarding items not on the agenda from the public. We have one, Velma Wilson. It's not plugged in.
Mic check. Good evening, everyone, to our board, to all of the citizens, to all of the families, students, those watching online. I am Velma Wilson, always representing Velma Wilson on behalf of Velma Wilson. First, I would be remiss by not saying thank you to our beautiful superintendent who was one of the panelists for last week's Day of Empowering Girls. It's one thing to have her be able to show our young girls what it is to be a future leader and to aspire to achieve the role that she's currently sitting in. So I was so happy when I got surprised with seeing, I tell her this was my seed because, you know, I've been in this district a long time, and to see some of these kids now went through elementary, middle, and now high school, and some of the things that I have always imparted in these kids, to see them now sitting here where my daughter once stood. So it's a beautiful thing. But I also want to talk about girls' empowerment. As we are closing out Breast Cancer Awareness Month, let us never forget all of those who struggle and who have overcome this vicious disease of breast cancer. So I pay tribute to my sister who is a breast cancer survivor, and to all of those who are battling breast cancer as of right now. I shout out to the principal, Bridget Spires, for being another survivor. We don't know what everyone goes through, but we are survivors, and let that be something that we all resonate. Coming up, we have November 14th, Ruby Bridges Day. And those that do not know who Ruby Bridges was, it's important that we understand and we really impart that knowledge to all of our young people. Because November 14th, a 6-year-old girl walked through the most desolate times in the civil rights movement. She made sure she was going to be educated. When folks spit at her, beat her, marshals had to walk this young black student to school, and guess what? She didn't miss one day. So her tenacity is what Ruby Bridges Day is about, and I hope that as we bring the first Ruby Bridges Day here in the city of Antioch, that all of you make it a conscious choice to please come to Dallas Ranch. On November 14th, we're going to have a continental breakfast, and then we're going to be doing some stuff around family engagement, where we're going to invite families to have lunch with their student. Lunch is on them. But we are trying to make sure that we are doing everything to show, one, a part of the community schools model. It's going to be a very fun and engaging event, and we really hope that you all come and support the efforts. We also have several community things coming up, and you'll hear more as the agenda goes forward, but we want to make sure that you are engaged and involved in what's happening. The AAPAC meeting just happened, the PAC meeting just happened, the DLAC meeting just happened. Get on board, be an involved parent so you too can have a successful student.
Thank you for that. Oh, 4A, okay. So Gavin, I just saw him. Oh, yeah, there he is.
Good evening, Council. I'm coming to you guys today to remind everybody that our event for November 4th is still ongoing. Please buy your tickets. We're almost sold out. It's on November 4th. It's appreciation dinner for Mayor Chanel Scales and Supervisor Federal Glover. and our proceeds are going to a youth scholarship. We are asking for our community to come and step in and help us, because right now the homeless rate is high. Students need help. They're either homeless or living in their cars, and what better way is to not invest into our future, because we may not have all the problems we need to fix today, but tomorrow we could probably have a better future. I would also like to tell everybody that we're the NAACP Youth Council, and we are still recruiting members, and we also encourage young members to vote. And I would also like to ask the council to please push that through the schools, to let the young people know that they have a voice, and their voices are much needed as heard now more than ever during these trying times. And let's help them get registered to vote, because they're the population that is not being heard as well. So let's help our young minds and young leaders, our future leaders, to be registered to vote and to speak positively and powerfully, so we can grow better and be better by tomorrow. Thank you.
Very good.
So
Very good.
So the event for NAACP is November 4th. Where is it?
At the Marina Event Center in Pittsburgh.
Marina Event in Pittsburgh. Okay. And so if youth wanted to get in contact with the youth NAACP, how would they do that?
On our Instagram, I can pull that up to you right now.
You can share it and we can share it out.
I can give you the Instagram. The flyer has a QR code on it, and you can purchase your tickets soon, or you can come and see me after the meeting and get your tickets then. But yeah, we're running out of tickets because we're almost sold out.
And if youth wanted to join the youth NAACP, how would they do that?
They can email us, or they can, I can give my phone number if they want, or I can give the branch phone number.
Okay. And so can you get the contact information too?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So that concludes 4A. So now we're moving on to 4B. We have 3, and this is individuals to address the board regarding items not on the agenda from district employees. The first one is from, I believe that's Leslie Adams.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to start off by thanking the district for being so supportive of the TK program. You guys have provided us with a lot of materials and support. I'd specifically like to thank Jason Larson, Mickey Beggar, and Amy Betancourt for all the assistance they've given us the past 2 years. I really appreciate that. One of the things I want to address is, as the kids are getting younger, by 3 months every year, there are more challenges. And, right now we have 24 students, and that would have been perfect for a regular TK. But as the kids are getting younger, it's more difficult for them to follow directions because they're so little. It's harder for them to line up, and it becomes a safety issue, when you try to get the kids from point A to point B in the event of emergency, like an earthquake that we had the other day, and, fire drills. And, if there's a real fire emergency, getting the kids out can be difficult because they're so little, and they don't really, even though you practice the drills and you practice when something really happens, you've got English language learners who are confused because it's difficult for them to follow directions because they don't speak English, and we have kids that are not identified with special needs, but, they may not respond to their name being called, and, you say line up, and you have to guide them to the line, and, when you have 24 kids, that's a big task. I noticed quite a big difference between my last year's class and then 3 months. The kids are younger by 3 months. Big, huge difference. We could line up in a line 2 weeks last year. It took us 2 months this year with the little tiny ones. So just, keep in mind, we really need 20 students in a classroom with, a teacher and an aide. And, as the kids get younger, and I know, the state may or may not fund that, but if they don't, we'd ask you to please support us with funding that, because that's really important. And like I said, it's a big safety issue. Also, kindergarten teachers face a lot of similar things that we face. And it, would be nice for them to have aides in the classroom, especially because we're getting a lot more kids with trauma. Like I said, special needs. We have kids that don't speak English. And, when I first started teaching kindergarten, years ago, we didn't face as many challenges as we do now. So please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Next is Amanda Freitas.
Good evening. Keep it on with trying to spread some positivity. I want to just, give two kudos. One, thank you, Trustee Hernandez, for coming and visiting our school. I know that the second graders really enjoyed having you there. And thank you for the book recommendation, because I also read that same book the same day, and my kids really enjoyed it. And it was My Powerful Hair. We read that on Indigenous Peoples Day, and my class really enjoyed it. I also wanted to give a kudos, because the last time I was here, I talked about how badly Fremont's parking lot needed to be relined, that we couldn't see where the spots were. And I was very pleasantly surprised to drive into the parking lot Monday morning to freshly painted lines in the parking lot. So thank you for that. But I do have a little disappointment tonight, because maybe I misheard at the last board meeting, but I thought that Dr. Latham's item about having the independent educational evaluation of the special ed was going to come back tonight, but I didn't see that on there. And I just have to say, as a parent of a student with special needs and as a teacher, the department is very frustrating for us. As a parent, not getting calls and emails returned when I have concerns is a little frustrating. Services not starting each year in a timely manner. It took, I think, almost 2 months for my son to get his counseling services this year. That, to me, is unacceptable. And then people rendering the services not getting correct information about my son. That's also frustrating. There was the time I had his IEP changed without my consent. Also very frustrating. As a teacher, the process. A couple years ago, we introduced the CARES team. So now students all need to be referred to a CARES team. I don't know how it is at every site. At our site, the CARES team does not include the teacher. So I write a little blurb about a student of mine who, might need some help or some concerns I have, but I'm completely not involved in the CARES meeting. They meet without me. They talk about a student that they really don't know anything about, and then are making decisions. And then I have to go to an SST1. And at the SST1, I was a little shocked, because it was just me, the parent, and an administrator. So there really was no team of experts to help me with my student. And then I have to go back to an SST2. And then maybe after the SST2, then maybe we might be able to refer him for testing or any other services that he could get. Something else I don't understand is not responding to parent requests for testing. We've had several parents at my site who have requested testing with the advisement of their primary care doctor, and we're either not responding to them, or we're telling them, I'm sorry, this is the new process. They're going to go to a CARES team, they're going to go to an SST1 and an SST2. And I'm not an expert in special education. I only know what I've researched because of issues I've had with my own son. But everything I have seen says that we respond to the parent within 15 days with an assessment plan. So I don't understand why that's not happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Laura Bowitt, I believe. Am I pronouncing that?
Bowitt.
Bowitt.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You are. Good evening. My name is Laura Bowitt, and I am a TK teacher at Fremont Elementary. I would like to begin by thanking Superintendent Anello for expediting the weed removal from the back of my classroom. My students and I really appreciate it, so thank you again. I'm here to represent my TK team in advocating for a 20-to-1 plus 1 aide for TK. For most of the children who are coming to us in TK, this is their first school experience, and they are coming to us younger and younger every year. I spend a lot of my day trying to meet the needs of each of the 24 students in my class. The needs go far beyond the classroom experiences, and I have planned for them, and many days I'm unable to get through those plans. Because I work with mostly 4-year-olds, I am distracted very often, whether it is tying shoes, sometimes up to 2 or 3 pairs at one time, putting on Band-Aids, directing students to hang up sweatshirts and jackets that have been peeled off and left on the floor, repeating, "Please stop touching your neighbor," and "Please sit smart," or answering all the important questions that young children like to ask. This may not seem like a lot, but when you multiply just one of these distractions by 24 students, it takes a lot of time. Each of the students in our classrooms deserve all the same attention, which brings me to another area of concern in TK. I would like to address those students who are coming into school for the first time who may have an unidentified need. For example, this year I have a very curious 4-year-old who cannot stay in one place more than 2 to 3 minutes at a time and will stand right in the front of me when I am teaching, which is distracting to others. He is unable to focus to follow directions without assistance. If he is not watched every moment, he is into everything or elopes out of my classroom if he doesn't get his way. His parents told me the first day of school that they believe he has ADHD and may be on the autism spectrum, and that both of those run in the family. They asked me to help. They asked for help in writing, but their concerns have not been addressed as of today. My greatest concern is that the last week he eloped 2 times without me knowing or my aide seeing him. I've had several different aides this year. I don't have a permanent one. I was assessing students for report cards, and my current aide got distracted by other students, of course. My aide, who is there to work with all the students, spends most of his time staying with and redirecting this one student. The student was observed by our behaviorist 2 times, and I was given a lengthy list of strategies without guidance, and of which I was overwhelmed on which ones I should try first and how I was going to obtain the items needed to implement them. Our CARES team and SS team systems are broken at our school. I will elaborate at another time. And students who need help the most are not getting it. Why should there be a limit on how many students are helped? This idea of overqualifying students seems ludicrous. Every student who needs help should be able to get it, and the younger we catch their needs, the better the outcomes. Our jobs are to serve students. Let's put them first.
Thank you for those comments. Next up is item 5, the bond survey, next steps. I believe there's a presentation.
Good evening. So I'm going to introduce a few members of a bond team that has been helping us put together and gather information to present to you tonight on putting a bond measure on the ballot. First, I have Jessica Polsky-Sanchez from EMC Research, who did the survey for the community. Next up will be Dave Olson from Backstrom, McCarley, and Barry, who's, I believe, in the audience. Oh, okay. So we have 2 presentations, and we'll let Jessica begin now.
Thank you so much, and good evening. I am Jessica Polsky-Sanchez from EMC Research, and these are the results from the recent survey of voters. Can you hear me okay?
Make it closer, please.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So I will review the results. This is an executive summary of results from the recent survey of voters within Antioch Unified School District. So before we go into the results, a few notes on the methodology of this survey. So as mentioned, this is a survey of likely voters, likely November 2024 voters in the Antioch Unified School District. That's the overall sample. We used mixed mode methodology to reach a representative sample of likely voters. So that incorporates live telephone interviews that happen over cell phones and landlines, along with online interviews by email and text invitation. The survey was conducted late last month. We did 500 interviews overall, so the overall margin of error is plus or minus 4.4 percentage points. We also had a subgroup of likely March 2024 voters, and so the margin of error when we're looking at results among that subset is plus or minus 4.9 percentage points. We did provide interviewing in both English and Spanish, and you'll see in some cases we have results from a 2022 survey of voters in this district to compare. Yes, thanks. There we go. Okay, a few key findings, and then I will show you the more detailed results. We do see that the overall mood of voters has soured since 2022. We see now fewer than 1 in 5 say things in the area are headed in the right direction. Now this has to do not with education specifically, but simply how voters are feeling very broadly. We also see that voters express tax hesitancy. That said, they do value quality local schools and believe they are a worthwhile investment. The good news that is, despite the decline in voter mood that we've seen, initial support for a potential bond measure is similar to what we saw in the 2022 poll. We see support above the 55% threshold among both likely November and likely March 2024 voters. We also see that additional context explaining the need for and the benefits of a measure is compelling, especially information around potential improvements to school safety, around the need for upgrades because of aging schools, and the accountability features of a measure.
Chris, can you change that?
Oops.
Thank you.
It is on. It's just reacting a little more slowly. Sorry about that. Okay, so as I mentioned, when we ask voters, do you think things in the Antioch area are generally going in the right direction, or do you feel things have gotten pretty seriously off on the wrong track? What you see on the right-hand side is that 75% say things are off on the wrong track, only 18% say things are headed in the right direction. So even though we saw some pessimism in last year's poll on the left-hand side, we see actually fewer voters saying things are headed in the right direction now. So we do consider this, pretty dire mood among voters. And this doesn't have to do with the schools. This is simply their mood overall about the way things are going in the area. Yes, shall I just say next slide and you can check? Okay, perfect. Okay. So we asked voters about their perception of need for additional funding for the Antioch Unified Schools. We said, do you see a great need, some need, only a little need, or no real need for additional funding? And as you can see, we asked this question back in 2022 and again this year in September. And what we hear is that the majority see a need for additional funding, more than half see a great need for additional funding, and 25% see some need. So 81%, almost universal perception of need for additional funding for the schools. On the next slide. We asked a few questions to understand voters' sentiment around taxes in general. So we asked, do you agree or disagree taxes in this area are already high enough? I'll vote against any tax increase. That helps us understand the percentage who are simply feeling a little hesitant about taxes right now. You can see 50% strongly agree and 19% somewhat agree, 69% in total. And that is a little bit higher than the 67% that we saw who at least somewhat agreed with that statement last year. We're seeing kind of a rise in tax sensitivity here and also elsewhere across the Bay Area. We're seeing this pretty consistently right now. However, we also asked, do you agree or disagree? It is crucial to have high-quality local public schools, even if it means raising taxes. Now here you see the vast majority at least somewhat agree with that statement as well, 64%, and that's very similar to what we saw last year. So certainly we see here that voters value quality schools and believe them to be a worthwhile investment. On the bottom, do you agree or disagree? I trust the Antioch Unified School District to properly manage tax dollars. Here we do see some expression of hesitation from voters, some lack of trust in management of tax dollars. If you advance a couple slides ahead, we'll show you what happened when we presented a potential bond measure to respondents. So we said there may be a measure on the ballot next year. It reads to upgrade local school classrooms, labs, and learning technology, replace or repair leaky roofs and outdated heating, cooling, ventilation, electrical, and plumbing systems, and make essential safety and accessibility upgrades. Shall the district's measure be adopted, issuing up to $195 million in bonds at legal interest rates, raising an average of $13.3 million annually until approximately 2059, at a maximum rate of $48 per 100,000 of assessed value, with oversight and accountability and all funds staying local. If the election were held today, would you vote yes or no? On the left-hand side, you can see that initially 60% of likely November voters say they would vote yes on this measure. Another 3% are initially undecided, but when prompted, which way do you lean? They lean toward yes, so the total there, 63% inclined to vote yes, 35% inclined to vote no, and so that's past the 55% threshold needed for passage for a bond measure. On the right-hand side, you can see very similar results among the subset of likely March voters. On the next slide, just really briefly wanted to show you that we asked a similar potential bond measure in the 2022 poll, and what we see today is quite similar to what we saw back in April. On the next slide, also looking back to last year's poll, we didn't ask these questions in this year's poll, but thought it would be relevant to bring some of the results from last year back to share with you today, because we asked about a series of potential components of a bond measure, and we asked voters on a scale from 1 to 7, with 1 being not at all important and 7 being extremely important, how would you rate each of these? And so what we're showing here are the top projects that were tested, so the highest priorities among those tested among voters were around reducing hazards in schools, replacing or repairing leaky roofs, ensuring buildings meet accessibility codes, safety and security systems, upgraded classrooms and labs, upgraded learning technology, and improved ventilation and air conditioning systems in schools. On the next slide, these next couple slides are the results from this year's poll when we offered a little bit of additional information about the need for and the benefits of a potential bond measure. So we presented each of these statements and we asked, how convincing is this as a reason to support a potential measure? So the idea is to understand how this information impacts voter support for a potential measure. And you can see here that some of these items were very convincing reasons for voters to support a measure, particularly the top item there about basic repairs, so explaining that some of the schools are more than 70 years old and are desperately in need of updates and repairs. This is very convincing to 44%, and it's at least somewhat convincing to 77%. School safety, some of the accountability features of a potential measure, emphasizing the good investment to voters and parents alike, and helping students prepare for the future. These are all convincing reasons to support a potential bond measure. On the next slide, an additional set of questions that were presented to voters over the course of the survey. Again, you can see a lot of these informational pieces are convincing and compelling reasons to support a measure. You do see some declining numbers as you kind of move down this list, heading into the last few questions around the benefits to fields and playgrounds, shade structures, and emphasizing the small price to pay, the cost of the bond measure. Those are a little bit less convincing, though still convincing to more than half as a reason to support a potential bond measure. On the next slide, once this information had been presented in the poll, we asked voters again. Sometimes over the course of a survey, voters will change their minds. Given what you've heard, would you vote yes or no on this potential measure? And they were presented with the measure text again. Interestingly, on the left-hand side, among the overall sample of likely November voters, we didn't see an increase in support after this information. We saw a couple points decrease, a couple points decrease in support after information. And among the likely March subset, we also saw a decline in support. On the next slide, we also offered some information that you might hear from an opponent of a potential bond measure. We said some people say now is not the time. This is how much the measure would cost. Taxes are already too high. Families are struggling. The district has plenty of money. So these are some of the things you might hear from an opponent of the measure. We wanted to see how that might impact support. And you can see that it does impact support overall. We go from 61% after informational statements to 55% support after this opposition statement. On the next slide, just showing the impact of the opposition statement among the likely March voter subset. You can see that support does drop below the 55% threshold to 51% with this opposition statement among the likely March subset. On the next slide, just a real quick comparison of this vote progression from the 2022 poll compared to the most recent poll. Really just highlights that the vote progression is quite similar. So we're seeing a similar result here that we did in 2022 with initial support exceeding the 55% threshold, not an increase in support after additional information, but a slight decrease after opponents' messages. So that brings us to the next slide. In conclusion, we do see results indicate that a potential bond measure appears feasible yet challenging for both the March and November 2024 ballots. We see voters are sensitive to costs and tax increases, and we think this is prudent to keep in mind when determining the bond amount. A strong majority of voters sees a need for additional school funding, but we also see some concerns around management of tax dollars, and altogether we think the district really needs to communicate about the improvements that could be made to local school sites with this additional funding. We also think an independently funded outreach effort will be necessary to emphasize all the important features of the measure, including the accountability features, along with the benefits, how it will provide for necessary and overdue repairs and enhance student safety. And that brings us to the end. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, for the work and for the presentation that went into this. So we'll start with Trustee Rocha.
I wanted to ask, can you identify the people that live on a certain area, like across, as we say, the highway is this side and then the people on behind on the other side, or the new growth? Let's put it that way. Which is not a new growth anymore, but it was at one time.
Sure. We did take a look at support for a measure by trustee area, just as a proxy for different the geography across the district. We didn't see a dramatic difference in initial support depending on the part of the district. We saw a fluctuation somewhere between 60% initial support and 67%.
I still continue to say Melrose was an issue for those houses. They've been without it for at least 5 years or more. We've got the schools that were built for that particular area. I don't understand if they don't want to support those schools, because that's what we did the money for. So that's what I'm trying to identify in the mindset, what is happening.
Yeah. It doesn't look like there's a major difference by geography in voters' inclination to support a potential measure.
Okay.
Ms. Polsky, sorry, do I recall, though, that District 3 had the most elevated, I believe that District 3, is that President Lewis? Mm-hmm. Which is the area, and I bring that up, that Melrose was heavily concentrated. Right. So that was the greatest support actually is in that area. So that's a good thing.
That makes me feel better.
Yes.
Sorry.
Good.
Any other questions, Trustee Rocha?
Well, I don't know if you can do that. If you did it by districts, can you identify what district might be less likely?
Yeah, like I said, it was pretty consistent across areas. I think it was trustees area, let's see, I don't want to speak without the data in front of me, but I do have it, so I can bring that up. Yeah, so trustee area 2 was at 60% initial support, and that was the lowest initial number across the trustee areas, and 67% in trustee area 3, so the others were around 62, 63%.
Yeah, so that support for the initial Mello-Roos had the highest concentration, yeah, of support. Trustee Lathan, Dr. Lathan?
Yeah, and I'm not surprised. I'm actually in area 2, and a lot of my community, they send their kids to the charter schools, Brentwood schools, other schools. So I think it's the trust. I'm not talking directly to you, but that needs to be built so they can want to pay for schools here when their kids are not attending school here. But my question is, the last time we passed a bond, I believe, was in 2012. Is that true? And you may have said this already, so forgive me, but was that on the March or the November ballot?
I don't recall, but I'm happy to look it up.
I believe that 2012 was in November.
Okay.
And 2008
Was in June. Okay, thank you. And so one thing I'm wondering with that information, knowing that it was passed in November, that's something that we might want to think about. And I believe, yes?
I make another comment that
Sure.
it passed in November after having come very close in June. And I think some people who worked on it would connect the two of them. The November campaign was able to be run on, we lowered the size a little bit, we heard you. So the fact that there was a campaign in June.
And so to that question,
I'm not finished.
Yeah, I understood, but I had a follow-up question.
Okay.
So to that point, if there was no June campaign, what are the feelings around the November? Did they feel it would have been successful?
Mr. Olson, do you mind coming to the microphone for people at home? I'm so sorry. Thank you.
And obviously, it's a long time ago, and people have different opinions. But I think it was thought that it was helpful that a campaign was run already, and that the bond program could be reworked in order to address some of the concerns of voters in June. I don't think there was much speculation over what if we ran this only in November, but I think there was a broad feeling among the consultants and the district people at the time that was helpful to have had a campaign in June.
And my next question is, or just comment is, just thinking about this election that's coming up in November will be quite a few big races statewide and also local. And I'd imagine traditionally, most of the time, there's bigger voter turnouts during those large elections. So that's just something to think about as well. And I'm thinking about time. Did you work on the Emeryville? No? Okay. You look familiar. But also just thinking about the time it takes to run a successful campaign, to fundraise, to get teachers to door knock, to like all these things, teachers and staff and board members, and run a healthy campaign, even, ads, commercials. That takes time. So I'm just wanting to make sure that we really think about the best way so that we can be successful.
Can I add something to that? Just something to think about. In November, there's a lot of talk that the state will go for a state facility bond and that districts should be prepared with matching funding. So if it's the will of the board going out in March and being successful, we would then already have our funding in order to kind of be the first one out the gate if it does turn out to be first come, first serve for that. Just food for thought.
Yeah. And another food for thought is March is in, 3-4 months? And when I talked to the superintendent who helped pass the bond in 2008 and 2012, she told me it took a year or two to really build it up so that people had confidence and voted for it, and we haven't had a bond since then. So I really want us to think about engaging the community so they can feel like they're part of it and they have a voice. And I know you all interviewed or surveyed 500 people. We have about 115,000 folks who live here. So that's just something to think about.
And we have another presentation, and we'll go into some sort of engagement that we can share with you that we've done to this date. So,
That's it.
yes, sir. Thank you.
Trustee Hernandez?
Yeah. What parts of the survey trends that you're seeing are unique to maybe Antioch versus a broader trend that we're seeing, or is everything kind of fully in line with broader trends?
That's a great question. The trend toward greater pessimism, along with added tax sensitivity, is something we are seeing across the Bay Area and across the state. So it's not unique to this area. We're also seeing voters with growing frustration around management of tax dollars. So that's a trend we're seeing elsewhere. I think, it varies district to district when it comes to support for a measure and some of the other kind of unique numbers that we see in this poll. It's also a little bit rare to see awareness of need for funding as high as it is here. So I think your voter community is very much aware, and that's helpful for us to understand that they know there's a need for additional funding here.
And then, is there any negatives to think about when it comes to something like a loss in March and then trying to then come back with another bond measure in November? I guess I'm thinking about some of the trends we're seeing, that if people already are pessimistic about this and they see us coming in with a bond measure and that fails, and then we come in with another bond measure, even with some adjustments, that might not have the best optics to set us up for a follow-up win on there.
Yes, I've definitely heard many of my clients talk about the challenges of potentially losing and then having to go back. I've also heard a lot of clients talking about, how things do seem to be getting worse, so now might be actually a better opportunity than down the road. So there are, I wish that I did have a crystal ball. There are a lot of pros and cons either way. Yeah.
That's all the questions I have.
One more question. I believe you said it already. Can you repeat how much it would cost each voter if we pass the bond closer to the $200 million? Like per year, how much it would cost them?
Sure. It's in the question that we asked in this poll, it was a maximum rate of $48 per 100,000 of assessed value. So that's assessed value, not market value of property.
I really don't know what that means.
Yeah, it's a calculation based on their property value. So it is a property owner assessment.
But what is it like? Can you give an example of what a dollar amount would be?
Sure. Well, the average amount for property owners in the district would be about $130 annually.
Thank you.
I do have one more question. I'm wondering if we have information about how language affects sometimes voters' perceptions and thoughts. I guess in particular with some of the questions we have here are all coming from like a deficit perspective of we need more repairs, we need these things, we're missing these things, versus perhaps a bond measure that maybe spearheads like, oh, this is a really great project that we need in our school district, and an additional focusing on more of an asset-based language. Do we know if voters respond better to one versus the other, or whether other bond measures have been successful for doing things like that?
Yeah, a lot of the information that we tested in this poll talked about the need and the benefits. I think we have learned over many years of talking to voters and hearing their feedback that it is helpful to help them understand things in if this will improve, this will maintain, this will benefit perspective, rather than threatening what might happen if we don't do this. So that's how I recommend talking about this, is really focusing on the benefits for local students.
So that's a good follow-up question. So for that is a follow-up question. If I'm understanding correctly, the interviews that were conducted ask more general questions, and then that would sort of inform how you would frame the questions for the actual, the positioning of the items for the actual bond.
Yeah, we wanted to understand what information is helpful so that they understand the need and what the funding would do for local schools. And so we did test that language to help us understand what are those key pieces of information that voters need to understand in order to be supportive.
One more question. Do we have any thoughts on why it is that more information led to voters being less inclined to support a bond measure?
Yeah, that's also a great question. As you saw, some of the very positive response to some of the information we offered isn't reflected in the vote in the survey after that information has been presented. If I had to guess, that would be because we had one informational statement that emphasized the average cost, and I think that probably led to some negative reaction. And so it really does lead us to that conclusion that voters are a little bit cost sensitive right now, so we need to be judicious in choosing a bond amount.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Can you tell the percentage of those that were not school people, or were they, parents, or?
Yes, we did ask a question in the poll if there are parents of Antioch Unified students. That's about a quarter of respondents. So 3/4 of likely voters are not parents of students attending
So
schools.
is that parents of AUSD students or parents of K-12 students?
AUSD students.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they could potentially be K-12 students.
That's right.
Parents of K-12.
Yes.
All right, Trustee Hack.
Basically speaking, I know the need is there. I know that you've given us information. You are the experts. If that is going forward with the district involved, I'm comfortable with what you decide, because I trust you. In terms of, we have these previous experiences, we have this new experience, the need is there. If we have that need, then we need to go forward, in my humble opinion.
So second part of this presentation is going to be Dave Olson, and we'll bring up the
Thank you for
PowerPoint right now.
the presentation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you again. I'm Dave Olson with Baxter, McCarley, and Berry. I've talked to you before. The first thing I'd like to say is that that's to me, that's a positive poll result, right? The three things I noticed: the decline in voter sentiment, that's unmistakable, but that's statewide. But the thing that was positive there is that the support for the bond remained very similar to what it was in 2022. And I think very similar to what it was in 2020 when you have an election that lost by, such a very, very small margin. The third thing I heard was that there's some tax sensitivity, but there's some messages that work through those things. So I think that it was a positive. When I saw those results, I responded positively to it. And this part of the presentation is designed to say, okay, what kind of bond program might we put together that would fit with those poll results? So the first slide, do we have a
Can you do the slide?
slide? Let's move on to the next.
It works.
All right, great.
Yeah.
I'm going to try. All right, perfect. So we knew we were talking about around a $200 million need. Liz and Ken have spent some time kind of working with site staff and looking at the needs and potential costs, and then divided out into separate groups. So about $150 million of basic safety and security needs, about $30 million of upgrades and improvements, and about $20 million of enhancements. So as we were putting together bond programs, we kept in mind these different buckets, right? And when we get to it, we won't be presenting any options that are below $155 million, because that's the kind of the basic need. You could go below that, but you'd want to at least cover, in my view and in the view of the team, at least all the safety safety and security needs, upgrades and improvements. As you add more projects, the tax sensitivity comes into play. So that's going to be a choice that we're going to show in some of these slides. But the basic needs fall into these three buckets: at least 150 million, as much as 200 million.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that point? So for the $48 per $100,000 assessed, which of those categories is
that was 195 million. So
195
essentially,
total.
that would fund all of those.
So assuming a house was $300,000, that would be what, $120 annual, approximately.
120 for the average homeowner. So $48 per 100,000 of assessed value. Currently, the average assessed value is a little over 300,000. Right. Your question about the difference between assessed value, right, tax value, and market value. Market value is going to be 600,000 or 800,000.
Okay, thanks.
So we have those needs, and I'm going to present some alternatives here, but I did want to put it in a little bit of context. And the first, the obvious point. Board Member Hack made it before. They're existing facility needs, right? They're extensive. They're a result of not addressing needs over time with the regularity that neighboring districts have done, with more frequent bond elections and more money invested in the schools. Needs. When we were talking about this in 2018, said, we may be able to spend $1 billion here, right? So they're extensive. But the first point, we know that there are needs, right? Talked about this when I came in May. The second thing is we know that we've been thinking about these needs for a long time. Right, 2018, I made some presentation here. 2020, 2022, we ran a bond election in 2020. Right, so we've been thinking that a bond was the appropriate thing here for a long period of time, and much of the discussion that we've had was focused on projects and timing and election strategy. There was never any question about, are there needs, right, or should we do a bond to address these needs? It's a difficult situation here. This is a tough place to pass bonds. There's been a sensitivity to tax rates for the whole time, right? You talk about the Mello-Roos and things like that. That's a new situation. So it was challenging in 2018 and 2020, 2022. It's going to be challenging in 2024 if we don't choose to move ahead. This time around, it'll be challenging in 2026.
Question.
So I don't think we build into what if we wait until the perfect time? Right, I don't think that's the right strategy.
Were you all the company that helped pass the bond in 2012?
Yes, 2008 and 2012.
Okay. And I hope during this presentation or somewhere similar, you talk about what actually happened during that time. And I know it maybe was different. No, 2008 was like hard because that was hard, right? During the recession. So just curious.
I can answer some specific questions later.
And 18 and 20 and 22 and all the other times we tried to pass.
Okay. So the bottom line is this has been discussed for some time. I'm going to come back to that one. In this election cycle, there's been a methodical approach, right? We started talking in the spring about how facilities are funded for California school districts and Contra Costa County, how our tax rates compared, how the number of bond elections compares to other places. We discussed, how big a Prop 39 bond measure might be in the range of 200,000. We came back, talked about what specific projects, that's over the last couple months, have been talking about the specific projects. So kind of step by step since the springtime to now, we've been working up these scenarios, and Jessica's presentation is the last piece of that, right? What voters will support. To this one?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, so I wanted to come back to that. So after that discussion, we're looking at these three options, and I think the bond team, including Liz and Ken and Stephanie and the consultants, really thought that it's a pretty narrow range, right? 195, more than 195 is a push tax rate wise, less than 155 is you're not really addressing kind of the core needs. So somewhere in between here, and we want to keep in mind, as we're considering and talking about these things, we want to keep in mind Jessica's comment about the tax sensitivity here. So, and we want to, and the messages, as Board Member Hernandez mentioned, right? It's maybe some of the sexier, the right term, some of the sexier projects are at the other side, not just the basics. But we thought 195 might be doable with a $48 maximum, 175, 43, 155, 38. We talked in our group whether there's a meaningful difference between $38 and $48, and Jessica says yes. So that's the bottom end is going to be, the lower amount is going to be easier to pass. The higher end is going to get more projects done, but be more difficult to pass. Wanted to share some of the assumptions that we used in putting together the model. I think one of the things to emphasize is that the projects won't all be done at once, right? If we pass the bond, be done over 6 to 8 years. Right. We've built in kind of a relatively conservative program, knowing that this is, kind of the first step of what might be a multi-step thing over a longer period of time. We don't want to use up all our bonding capacity on this one shot, especially given the tax sensitivity. But we also know that if we build it conservatively, we're going to have a chance to under-promise and over-deliver. So we talk about a kind of an 8-year cycle. Hopefully we'll get better AV growth, better tax-based growth. Hopefully we get lower interest rates. We'll be able to do things a little faster than that. But we're basically building it around there. One of the things that I'd add is that like a voter who says now's not the time, not all the tax rate is going to hit right at first. So that's an advantage of doing something over time, is that the impact will be greater when the economy's a little bit better. Obviously, we could choose a number besides 195, 175, or 155, but they have been chosen, with some forethought here. We've used conservative assumptions, as I said, so that we're under-promising, over-delivering. Cross your fingers, who knows what the future will bring. 8-year implementation program doesn't get the needs done right at first, but allows you to, spread the costs over time and link to a potential next bond if you're doing work here forever and ever, every year for the next 10, 20, 30 years, right? You don't want to start, stop. And then I described kind of the bookends. The 195 is probably, we don't want to push tax rate beyond that. 155, that's kind of the low end for what we might need to get the basic needs done. And if we decide to move forward, we're going to need to, if we decide to move forward for March, we're going to need to pass a resolution by December 8th. And we've talked to a legal attorney who's already underway on documents and all stuff like that. But what that's going to take is a resolution calling the election. That resolution would have to have an amount. It takes a 75-word ballot measure. You saw from Jessica's presentation that it's kind of a complicated thing, and there's so many state requirements that there's not a lot of flexibility there. We need a bond project list. It's probably 3 or 4 pages that will list all the potential projects that you can do. So the Bond Oversight Committee can look at that and say, yes, that was on our list. And we need a tax rate statement, which is just something that will match to the size of the bond and the structure that I talked about. But the hearing with the voter sentiment was the last step of a kind of this 6-month process that we've been going through. And we're on track if the board thinks that March is a good time.
And so I'm going to take over for a minute here. So this is an example of one of the ways that we were getting input from the community. We worked with the principals so that they worked with their staff and their school communities to get input, and did write-ups that we included in the Friday board update on the sort of the summaries of each school site and the ages and what is needed there. I attended the DLAC and the Parent Advisory Committee meetings where we got some really good input, and they were able to, on a Padlet, thanks to Christine, help me present a Padlet where they could give instant feedback. And with that Padlet, we started to both put it on our website as well as Facebook. And so this was one of the ways they can do it while we were on our Zoom meeting, where they would take a picture with their phones, and then they would go to their school site and they would put input. So since maybe over a week and a half ago, we've had over 350 entries that we're looking at, and we've had over 2,300 individuals that went in and either liked or acknowledged some of the things that they also wanted done at their school site. So I have a long list of all the entries specific to each school site that we're seeing. We went to administration meetings. We had the facility master plan that I hope you all had a chance to look at that we sent from 2018. And a lot of the information in there has not really changed, like Dave said, because the needs are still there. And, considering the tax sensitivity and the condition of our schools, we felt like we could probably come up with a good bond program of around $155 million to address like the safety needs initially, because there are out there. And Dave, I don't know if you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's very good.
We'll take questions.
Okay.
But I think the survey results are very consistent with all, the kind of the things that we've been describing over time, that the people know that there's a need here, but are wondering, how much they're willing to pay to meet the needs. And so we're trying to.
155.
Yeah.
And so barring a special board meeting, because again, you said December 8th is when a decision would happen. Barring a special board meeting, a decision, we would have to vote to give direction tonight, correct? Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And just some of the information that I got from the information that we every day when I come into work, I have more information on this Padlet, right? Because people go in. We had about 60 line items of individual different school sites of bathroom or restroom improvements. I looked at about 60 HVAC and AC improvements, people that have put entries on that at their particular school sites. We had about 34 of individuals that put something that they either want a new gym, some of the Orchard Park parents, or improvements to their existing gym. Playgrounds, about 30 people made mention of wanting new playgrounds at their school sites. So we have a lot of good information that we're working with and we're continuing to collect.
So, Ms. Robbins, were we going to put up 3 possible amounts with the tax rate, or for the board to see? Are they because
Yeah, it was there on a couple.
Oh, it was. I missed it.
We have it, yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you.
I
Maybe
think
put that up and let the board discuss it.
The recommendation is the middle or the 155?
Well, given the tax sensitivity from the thing, 155 would be on the very first slide where we had the bucket of the safety. So I think that is a...
So that's your recommendation?
Yeah.
Yes.
I use that word, but,
Yeah.
okay.
Trustee Hack?
We have the need, and if that's the recommendation, then that's where I go. Absolutely.
Trustee Hernandez?
Yeah, so I know the March 2020 election failed by just a little bit. Was that then later placed on the November election?
It was, if you remember, March 2020 was a special time in history. And I think the schools were closing down and there was another focus to the district. I think there were some voices that wanted to move forward, but it was pretty chaotic time.
Got it.
So let me ask another question. If we choose, let's say, a number, we can modify that number going forward at another time.
You can modify the number up until the time you choose to put it on the ballot.
Okay, no, if we pass it, can we do it in another addition to that?
Yes.
It's somewhere down the road.
Yes.
Okay.
2026, 28, 30,
Just to go
32.
from 155 to 175 to whatever. We can add the different.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and then the next question, On the slide with the three options, it says that not all identified projects don't represent all the needs. The next one, or the one where we have the three different bond range options. Can you explain what that means?
Yes, that the project list that was developed in connection with this was developed with the consciousness of $200 was kind of or $200 million was kind of the upper limit of what the voter threshold would likely be, that the Prop 39 threshold would likely to be, the amount of needs in the district is quite a bit further than that. You won't have gleaming new magic perfect schools after.
Got it. So when we talk about needs, we're talking more closer to that $1 billion number that we had of identified different things going on.
Yeah, it depends on what you want, right? I would love to have a couple Teslas in my.
And then what evidence do we have that cost sensitivity is this continuous number such that the 38 and 48 are different?
Okay, I'm going to step aside.
Yeah, we didn't get into would you support this much, that much in the poll. Usually we recommend not doing that because that's not a negotiation we're actually able to have with voters when we put a measure before them on the ballot. So as you saw, we did test kind of a higher amount that would allow the district to do more of the projects that you've seen. And we're factoring in all of the other results where we saw, a drop in support once we presented more information about cost. We saw a high level of agreement that taxes are too high and I'll vote against any tax increase. So some of the indicators in this poll are just telling us that it would be honoring kind of the wishes of voters to go with a more conservative amount. But we don't have clear data saying you can get past it at this amount, but not that amount.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I just want to be, we have so much needs here. If voters are able to see these needs and we want to get them done and it's, money now spent is always a better choice than waiting for money later when things get more expensive. So if we can get a bond passed that's going to address more of our needs sooner, I don't want to miss that opportunity if we don't have to. And then, this is kind of moving on to the input piece. How are we getting input from people outside of the Antioch Unified School District?
Well, we don't necessarily have at this time an option to do an all call and send an email with the QR code, but when I've been in meetings and talking to people, tell your neighbor, tell your friends, and they can go to our website and give input. But the input is by school site.
Yeah, because I guess I'm wondering, right, if this survey took, 500 people, which 25% were people that identified as parents, then we still have 75% of people that were surveyed are still voting for this, yet have no direct line of feeling stakeholder engagement in this process so far. And we want to make sure that we do as much as we can to mitigate, again, any kind of loss in support for this. So I'd love to make sure that we're finding ways to be creative to make sure we're capturing the entire voter base to make sure that this passes.
And putting it on Facebook, we hope that we get people outside of the school district.
Yeah. And then my follow-up question on that, touching on that, is what plans do we have to make sure we capture non-digital natives, so people that aren't engaging necessarily through virtual or digital or online means? What other pathways do people have to engage with this?
For the school site communities, the principals and the administration at the school sites have been engaging with their specific communities.
We'll also do precinct walks if the board wants to move forward with this. And a lot of the likely voters who aren't parents will be in those precincts, and we'll hopefully have conversations. Also attend community meetings that are not necessarily school meetings, Rotary, service clubs. Faith-based.
And then the last question I have, potentially getting a little bit further outside the scope here, is how do districts typically show accountability to voters? Are projects like these tied to student outcomes in maybe more concrete ways, or what are the different pathways that districts use to show accountability to voters when it comes to the use of these funds? I don't know who that question
Well, this is not going to answer the question directly, but there were, in 2000, when the voter threshold was reduced to 55%, there are a number of accountability safeguards built into that Prop 39. One is that there's a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee that presents an annual report, and is that committee is required to have different people representing different groups, senior citizens, taxpayer groups, things like that.
Okay, and yeah, that's all the questions I have for now.
Dr. Latham?
I have two questions. One is the one I asked you earlier, which was the last bond that was passed in 2012. Do you remember the strategy, like what, from your perspective, happened to make it happen?
So there, if I could talk about both of the elections, the 2008 and 2012, the most important factor, or a prominent factor in the 2008 election, was poll results that indicated a big difference in reception between people who were paying the Mello-Roos tax and not paying the Mello-Roos tax. And so the 2008 measure was placed on the ballot only in what we called School Facility Improvement District Number 1, the older area of town, and projects could only be done in the older area of town. So that was a major factor in the 2008 election. So that's a smaller tax base and therefore a smaller bond. So that was a $60 million or roughly $60 million bond. In 2012, the major factor was the Great Recession. And the tax base, which supports these bonds, fell by 40% in Antioch over a period of 3 years. So it was one of the biggest impacts of anywhere in the state. Right there's if you draw a ring that's 50, 60 miles out from a major metro area, that was the area that was really hit by the housing crisis. And so 2012 was going back and getting the money that was needed to do the projects that we wanted to get done with the 2008 bond, but we couldn't issue the 2008 bond because we were limited by the tax base that was a different size. So the kind of strategic elements in 2008 was there's a huge need. We have a group of people that won't support it. Let's design the program for the people where it had support. And the 2012 is people wanted us to get these projects done. We can't issue all the bonds that it takes to get those projects done. And so we need to reauthorize in a sense.
Thank you.
Is that a fair explanation?
Yes, from your perspective. That's what because when I talked to the superintendent, her thing was time, campaigning, involving the community. So from your perspective, that makes sense.
Right.
And then from the
In numbers
perspective, from the perspective of someone who's actually, like the district and the board implementing, there are different strategies that are aligned with the strategy you're talking about. Thank you. The second part of that is, I've been asking around different districts about, like, how did you pass that bond measure? And one idea that I heard consistently was getting people together prior to, and you just mentioned it, Superintendent Anello, which is like campaign committee with people to get outside the area that Trustee Hernandez just talked about. So city officials, religious leaders, business partners, parents, Chamber of Commerce, and the whole point is to get people hyped up and excited. And if we can create a committee like that, that takes time. You have to be consistent and have a strategy, but then those people talk to their congregants or they talk to local businesses. So that's why I'm advocating for how do we strategically move forward and not rush in a way that we actually miss some important folks who could really help us. So I know that that's a common thing that districts do who are, successful passing bonds.
Trustee Rocha?
Yeah, I have mixed emotions because I've been through this bond issue, and I know that I've been in this community for a long time, and this community is very conservative. So when I look at those three, I'm thinking to myself, it's hard enough to push a bond issue through. That in my thinking, we should go for the 195 because that way we get everything done. Because we might not be able to come back and do it again. Second thing is, I'm not sure about the march because that's a limited amount of people, and of course, in November, it's a bigger, larger group. So I'm mixed emotions there. I'm already on the side that's paying 2 bond issues. And that just adds another amount of money. And we're in the lower income area. It's the I don't say higher income, but it's the other income that has to come forward. And so that's why I keep hitting that, is that it's about time they understand they have to take care of their schools, which is for all of us, because we all use the different school system. So that's why I'm kind of mixed. I'm there and I've been talking to the Spanish-speaking population because I go to their meetings, and I tell them it's going to be up to them to carry it out. They might not be able to vote, but they do have children that can vote, and they have family members and people that are nearby their neighborhood on this side of town. That's what I'm thinking of. So I'm willing to go with the March, kind of worried, but then it gives me the opportunity to know if we don't make it on March, we'll make it in November. So that's where I'm at. I'm willing to go along.
Can I add one more food for thought? Is that we will need to start getting a bond funding. We'll have to get donations. And just a thought, if we go out in March and let's say we've raised $55,000, we have to go back to the same usual donors in November. So just something to think about. And I'm not saying it couldn't be done. It's just something I want the board to consider also when they make their decision.
Yeah. I think the little bit of the flip side to that argument is that if, right, there are fewer voters to reach in the March election, and so it's can be run on a little bit lower budget. Obviously, a March and November together is the highest of all the budgets, so it's a judgment call.
Yeah, another question. Do bonds like these typically have attached with them a project labor agreement with unions?
They can.
It's up to the group.
I guess I'm thinking that's another way to engage the community and to show accountability to voters and to create maybe more momentum. Is that something that has been talked about at all?
In the past bonds, I think we did one with the project labor agreement and one without, and I don't recall there being, both of those passed. I don't recall there being a big difference in the amount of donations. Do you recall?
I don't remember.
Okay. But
So in addition to all the questions, so thank you, trustees, for that. So, I think one of the questions that keeps sort of peaking throughout the conversations is, whether or not the district is good stewards of finances. And I think one of the ways that we could potentially show that we are is how we handle the ESSER funds, because we did just get this influx of cash. We did just get this influx of cash that we could show over the last number of years. This money was earmarked for these things. This is how we used it. And so that may be used, that could potentially be used as justification for showing that we are good stewards of finances and resources.
And maybe making an effort to distinguish between the school district and the city of Antioch.
Right. Right. Okay. So I think, unless there are any other questions, we can.
Are we making a decision at this time?
So we are going to vote whether or not we move. Are we voting on the amount, or are we voting on whether or not we move?
What do we, strategy?
We need a decision before December 8th.
Oh, direction. Is that what you want?
direction, consensus, correct.
Okay.
Okay. So no vote, it's consensus.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So do we have consensus
For what?
for moving ahead or not with this bond
Are you
for the
getting-
March?
Oh, you're getting the March.
We're going to start
date.
with March, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I think we should, yeah.
So we can move ahead with next steps for March?
I'll go for March.
Yeah.
I don't agree with March.
Okay.
What amount?
So which amount are we thinking
For March,
for March?
I think 155.
I think we should go with the full value, the 198.
Okay.
I agree.
All right, so
Which
Trustee
one
Hack,
do you
is there a
agree with?
reason why you?
195.
Okay, what are you thinking?
Me?
Yeah,
I agree with the 195, but again, we want
I'm
to get.
fine with that then.
Okay.
There's three of us.
The majority is already there. I mean,
Yeah, of
which
course,
I'm
but
fine.
again, the goal is to have conversation
fine.
and, yeah.
Oh, that's fine.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.
So whatever we decide,
So we've decided
Just put
that.
official.
Yeah, so we'll make it official. Thank you, Trustee Hack. So we are going to go ahead with the next steps in the bond process. resolution, and
Resolution's
we will have
next.
195. So the question is, because the resolution has to be signed before December 8th, is it? We would have to call a special meeting to sign that resolution.
No.
I'm already in January. My brain, I apologize. It's audit season, so, yes.
We can do it, we can do the next board meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you, and thank you for the presentations.
Thank you.
All right, so next up, we have number 6, hearings. There are none. Public presentations, there are none. Following our consent items, do we have any that need to be pulled?
Yes. Um, $8K, service agreement with Houghton Mifflin Harcourt Publishing Company, Read 180, ELA, and math. That's an intervention program. And just have a few questions. I'd imagine I'll direct them towards Ms. Ibarra. I sent her the questions earlier. How long have we used Read 180 in math? Read 180 intervention?
This, we've used it one complete year last year, and this is our second year.
Please share student learning outcomes as a result of using this particular program.
So I'll go through some details, so there's some context. So last year, we had Read 180 in special education classes only at Antioch Middle School, Dallas Ranch Middle School Park, OPS, Orchard Park, and Antioch High School. The data for those students that took that course increased an average of 2.8 grade levels within 1 year. And for Math 180, it was only in one general education class at Black Diamond Middle School, and the data for that was that the students increased 1.4 grade levels from start to finish of that program.
Thank you. And what percentage of the instructional time is for students is on a computer versus a teacher teaching them?
So the way the program is structured is that it is broken into segments, and essentially there is a whole group instructional period, and then there is what they call a rotation. And so students will rotate in small groups. So a small group will be working with the teacher specifically on some skills. Another small group of about 8 students will be working on the computer, and then another small group will be working independently on some reading activities related. And so it tends to be around 20 minutes at that time, and it depends on the school and how their block, because some are block schedules, so they have a little more time. Some have 55-minute sections. And so it really varies. From what I've heard and looking through how kind of every school approaches it a little, that's unique to their schedule, they'll do the whole group. They might have time, if they're saying a 55-minute section, they might have time to do one rotation, but then they'll come back and do the other 2 rotations the following day. So it's broken up depending on time schedules.
Yes, I asked because I know sometimes we found that a lot of kids are spending a lot of time on the computer, and it's actually not improving their learning versus having a teacher who's actually providing direct instruction.
Right.
Or guided instruction.
It's kind of a centers concept, so it allows the teacher to work with a small group while they're rotating. But it's not more than 20 minutes.
Okay. Yep, that's it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a follow-up question now that that discussion was had. Is this program at full implementation, or is there more schools that...
There's more schools, so that's what this contract is for. So for this year, the goal is to take Read 180 that will be in all special day classes and at one or more general education section at Antioch Middle, Dallas Ranch, Park Middle, Orchard Park, Antioch High, Deer Valley High now, Dozier Libby,
and Live Oak, and 1 general education section at Black Diamond Middle School. And then Math 180 is also expanding, and that is for all special day class students at Antioch Middle, Park Middle, 2 sections for special day class students at Deer Valley High School, and then there will be 2 general education sections at Black Diamond Middle School.
And then, so yeah, with the expansion, are we then at full implementation, or is there still even more schools?
There could be more. I think we may start seeing more in the general education classrooms, so that those students can catch up and hopefully avoid being in special education. So that's ultimately our goal. In our secondary schools, it's very challenging for students to have this level of intervention. And so I'm really happy that we have this program now, and we're seeing growth for students.
And then another question that may not have the answer, because I'm asking it on the spot. Do you know what the underlying evidence-based practice that this program uses? Is it more especially for the reading, I'm thinking, is it phonics-based, or is it that a balanced learning? Because I've been looking into a lot of challenges that have come to the way that schools have been teaching reading for a long time.
Right. It is research-based. It's developed based on really looking at the individual needs of the students. So, for instance, I'll just take Read 180. Read 180 has its own program, but then they have what they also call System 44. So these programs are only with in mind the students that are at least 1.5 or more years behind. But there are students, say, that are 3 years behind or 4 years behind. And so there's System 44, which is essentially more of a phonemic awareness component. And that helps kind of shore up those skills so that they can approach. It's in 2 levels. It's like at level A and level B. And so then as they move through the program, they'll get to level B, and ultimately the goal is to get them back into grade level reading, English courses, and math.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Makes my heart palpitate a little bit when I think about how the teachers have come up and talked about reading instruction. I have experience with Read 180. I actually stopped it when I was a principal, and we shot up because teachers were taught how to teach kids to read versus the computer. That's why I asked you that. It's nice to see that we are getting growth, but I know for students with disability, even students without disability, we saw during the pandemic, kids struggled. And so to have them on the computer, and the computer is teaching them how to read or comprehend or, understand math concepts, is really a challenging concept for me to accept as an educator, because I know that the power is in the teacher.
It is. And we do have embedded coaching that comes with this, because that's incredibly important. We can't just hand over the program and expect this teacher to be able to implement the program with fidelity. And so I think with having that extra support, that's why we're seeing the growth that we're seeing.
Okay.
Did you have other items?
Congratulations on 8L, which is service agreement with JWL Consulting on the $150,000 Kaiser Permanente Medical Health and Wellness Grant. So congratulations to us. And then 8N, as in Nancy. This is about the service agreement with Marinum Incorporated. Secret Stories and Phonics. I looked them up. I'm like, okay, they offer some work there. Considering that most of our students are kids of color, I would love to see someone like Zaretta Hammond, around culturally responsive teaching in the brain. When I look at our reading, when they came up, the teachers, and they did the presentation on our literacy plan, when I read this, it is very white-centered, and I don't see kids of color in that. And I taught reading very well, right? And I'm like, something is going on where we actually need to think more globally about the type of programs we bring in, and also the people we bring in and their experiences. Because when I look at African American and Latino students in particular, but even our white students are not faring well. And I know that's why we're bringing in Read 180 and scaling that and things like that. Just really want us to think about those things. That should be front and center, because our kids deserve it. 9A, agreement between California School Employees Association. Oh, we're not in 9. You know it's coming. I did have one for 8J. I feel like it's a separate conversation, but I want to be transparent about it. It's around the special education request. We keep having that request. So I really want to, and I know on the November 8th agenda, it says that we're going to talk about special education and a possible assessment. But just every time I see it, I'm like, why are we assessing so many kids outside of the special ed teachers actually assessing them? So there's nothing to report now or talk about now unless you want, but I know it's on the agenda, so I wanted to let you know too, it's on the agenda for
I
November.
just wanted to make one small comment because we've been looking at our data in special education and just looking at the trends over time. And that is in one area with the IEE. We have had already a reduction in IEEs from this point in time. What
is IEE?
Huh? IEE?
Evaluation.
Independent education evaluation, yeah. So we've had a reduction in the number at this point in time.
Request.
That's it for me. Somebody else might have something.
Any other to pull?
Excuse me, is that a parent request? So then we have to follow if they are requesting it.
The question is, why are people asking?
Well, as a parent, I probably would want to do that too.
I think that's something we should talk about, yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'll entertain a motion.
Consent items A through O.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Okay, I have a motion on the floor properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? The motion carries. All right, so moving to number 9, 9A, agreement between California School Employees Association, Chapter 85, and Antioch Unified School District, Article 19, Transportation.
So as part of the 22-23 negotiation process with CSEA, it was decided that the Article 19 needed to be looked at and reevaluated and sort of done on the side because it was a large article and there's during that process, we wanted to include the transportation department, both the bus drivers and the management. So as a collaborative efforts between CSEA, Transportation Director Nate Hill and Michelle Howe as the supervisor, with HR, before you are the agreed about negotiated changes. Most of the changes pertain to the assignments of how we were assigning bus routes and the number of times per year that we were assigning bus routes. We were doing it twice a year, and it was very complicated and messy, and it was doing it in July and then again in October. So before you have both versions, one of with the strikeout version, so you can see the exact changes, but primarily it was to the assignments of the bus routes and when and how they can bid on the bus routes, because that's how they get their bus routes assigned. It goes through a bid process. The other major change is that we were going from making the bus drivers 7 to 8 hours. Most of them already worked 8 hours, and they were having to put timesheets in for the extra hour, and so this solidifies the number of hours they work per day.
And is the 21 days on a consecutive route, is that 21 full 8-hour days? Or is that 21, I think it's item, let's see.
So they're 8 hours.
8 hours, so it has to
Every
be.
day.
Yeah. Okay.
Every day, yes.
All right, any discussion? Trustee Rocha?
No, fine.
No? Trustee Jack, Dr. Jack?
I like the addition of the new language. And especially the committee comprised of the CSA reps. I think that's important.
And thank Dr. Rob for that. His effort.
All right, so I will entertain a motion.
I so move.
So move.
Agreement between CSEA and the district.
Okay, so I have a motion. I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, motion on the floor properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
I think there was I think it's 7 hours. Is that correct? We just got something from Dr. Martinez. I want to make sure. 7 hours? It's 7, yeah. Just,
It's 7 hours, okay.
sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Vote on 7 o'clock.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? The motion carries.
And we will thank CSEA and the group that they put together to help us.
Thank you,
Come
team,
to a
for putting that
consensus.
together. Yeah, give yourself some love.
Once in a while it works.
All right, so 9B, and this one is initial proposal from AUSD for 2023-24 to the CSEA Chapter 85.
No, B.
So this is this CSEA and the union, and the districts for their sunshining for us to start negotiations.
So this one requires a vote.
Yes.
Any questions on this before we get to that point?
Sunshine proposal.
All right. All right, so I will entertain a motion.
Move approval.
I have a motion on the floor.
I'll second.
I have a motion on the floor properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? The motion carries. All right. So item 10, board governance model.
I can talk, but I don't know who.
I don't know, I think there was a conversation for the board governance model. We had a presentation, I think it was 2 board meetings ago.
Yes.
And
Mr.
trustee Rocha
Chair.
asked to bring this item
Mr.
back.
Chair, the item because we couldn't get a full board at the time, there was
That's
different
right.
reasons.
Yes.
And the person that made the presentation, there was a disagreement here on as to how, what criteria was used in order to bring in the individuals. And we're getting close to another election. And is it wise to go ahead with the, a board workshops at this point, or wait until the coming months? Because it's just a matter of time.
When you say board elections, you mean?
Well, there'll be a replacement, or maybe keep the same individuals. We don't know.
Oh, you mean
Coming
the
up.
entire board?
Yeah.
The school board?
Because it's trying to get us all together on the same foot. And there's a disagreement as to what was brought up as criteria to use. And I personally like the presentation the individual gave. It was tied to the goals that the parents had, and so I thought that we should go in that direction, but that wasn't the understanding of the board.
And so your suggestion now is that we hold off on developing a board governance model until after the 24 election?
That's my thinking, but that's up to the group.
Thoughts?
Clarify me, Mary.
I was going to say it's Monday. Spanish came in. No, I was just thinking that timing-wise, we've been trying to do this governance, and we
Right.
haven't come up with an agreement as to the presentation should be done or who should do it.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if we shouldn't just wait until the next election coming up, which is just around the corner, until we have a complete board again, not knowing where it's going. Or do we go start in again, trying to find a person to come in? It's going to take time. We'll probably be until next year, because we're already hitting the holidays. I'm just throwing it out for conversation.
Oh, no.
I can go. Yeah, I think it's still worth moving forward on this. I think thinking about the next election kind of slows down progress that we can make as an organization. I think as a district, we have a lot of areas where we can improve organizationally. We run really bare bones with our governance structure compared to other school districts that have additional structures in place, such as like committees, such as like governance calendars, such as governance handbooks, governance models, I think, which is our primary objective here. But those kinds of things can help future trustees that also then go on the board to give them more structure, give them more ability to get a greater sense of the organization at a faster rate and be able to do more for our students at a faster rate, besides having to learn on a more loosely organized organization. I mean, I think we do pretty well, but I think there's an opportunity for us to do even better.
Just, did you have something?
Ditto, Trustee Hernandez. I can't say it any better.
Trustee Hack?
I tend to agree with Mary, but I don't care. You do it either way.
If we could just come to an agreement as to the presenter is,
Yeah.
that's all.
Well, I'm fine if we
I mean,
have
the
this,
last
the
person
presenter,
that
yeah.
came, I was fine with, but
And I
haven't
think
been
there's-
able to get an agreement.
I think there's two levels. I think there was questions around. My understanding is there was two levels. There's the board governance model, and then there's also a second piece around, how we engage students. I can't remember the exact language that we use for that, but I think if we separate those two, I would be comfortable with having the person that presented come and helping us to establish a
Calendar and all that, I agree with you.
Yeah.
So
But
the
that's-
person that
That came in the last time,
came in
they
the
gave
last
us a
time,
presentation
you're
and about,
saying that we should bring that person back.
Well, no. We should just vote. Well, I can't say my position,
Okay.
so I retract that. But making a decision on whether or not we want to move forward with having a governance model developed. So that, that governance model created.
We have tried to establish governance models twice, and various board members have rejected both of those models, even before they started or whatever. So if we're going to bring an individual back that made a presentation here, but basically the board said no.
Well, no. We postponed. We didn't say no.
Postponed?
Well, no, I think there's a misunderstanding happening
Yeah,
here.
it is.
Because, what happened was as a board, we had decided on a governance model, and I think there's a misunderstanding as to what that means. Because at our last, the last presentation by the firm that came to us talked about putting together a board governance handbook, which is just like a set of norms and ways that we conduct ourselves during meetings and different reference things, but don't have any more teeth when it comes to what we should be doing as a board. Whereas a board governance model gives us a framework about how we should be approaching changes within a school district and various levels of different guardrails of if we do this policy, what kinds of things should we be seeing in terms of student outcomes? And that's in particular to the model that we've talked about in the past, a student-focused governance model, which would say hey, if we put this policy forward, what should we be seeing from our students, or why are we doing this policy? And gives us a framework to make sure that our conversations are always framed about these things and that we don't start losing it, getting sidetracked. I think one of the things that is very challenging about education is that everything will sound good because every bit of effort for our students feels like a good thing, but our job is to make sure that we're getting the most value out of things. There's I always say there's no after school program, which sounds like a bad idea because it's all further investment in our students. What we need a way of how do we discuss what after school program is better? What are we wanting to see out of our students' lives, about their experiences, about what they come out learning, and being able to frame that in a shared understanding. That's what a board governance model does. And to this day, we have not had anyone come up and present a board governance model to us. They've presented other things, and that's where the misunderstanding was in terms of understanding what a board governance model is.
Okay, I disagree with what you're saying. So what the question is, this person who was here last time, you're asking that person to come back and deal with this model?
They can't.
No,
That's
no,
not
no.
their role.
I'm just saying.
No. So
I'm not understanding.
I was looking. So
then let me add the last point then on there. So I think the next step of what we should be doing is we need to put out an additional RFQ for a board governance model specifically, because it seems that there was that wasn't maybe communicated quite as tightly if we had people come up and present these other different outcomes and deliverables to us. So that's my understanding of the situation and where we were at and what we had discussed.
I agree, and it feels like, so we asked for a board governance model. That was a conversation we had at a board session. It wasn't, it was like a Saturday session or something like that, or evening. And that's what we talked about. We looked at the student outcomes focused governance model. Everyone said, yes, we want to focus on students. Let's bring folks let's do an RFP. The RFP that was put out did not align to that. So I think that was the first challenge. I believe, I agree with Trustee Antonio Hernandez that we need to redo the RFP and actually have voice into what it says, because it's for us. So we should see it. We didn't even know the RFP was out. We didn't know there was going to be an RFP. So we need to actually look at it and have conversations and contribute to it so that we can get what we're actually looking for. I 100% agree that we should not wait. This is for our kids. We need to function at a high level. And right now we don't have guardrails. And those are things that we can put in place. It's done across the country. This is what boards are supposed to do.
Did we not see the RFP? It seems like we sent out one, and then it came back with different people addressing the issues that were on the RFP.
What I'm saying is that we didn't talk about having an RFP. So we agreed that we were going to have, folks, we were going to reach out to people, have conversations, but there was no agreement about the RFP or what was going to be in it. I saw it when it was done and it was going to be sent out.
Stephanie?
I'm happy to do whatever is the will of the board. I will say the language in the RFP came verbatim from what the board directed at their May 11th meeting. So it's pretty standard when we go out for a service provider that we do an RFP. So I'm sorry that you didn't know that in advance. So I guess I'm here to say I'm sorry, there's some talking in the back. Having a hard time here.
So can we, okay, thank you.
What was said by the board then, and again, you can revise this, there was consensus to move forward with having a facilitator come in to help the board develop what they consider their AUSD model. And this is the quote. How do we agree to be together and govern together? And the second was, how are we doing it, and how do we measure progress and accountability?
Yeah.
So if that's a misunderstanding with the board, we need to know it and move forward with however you want to move forward.
Yeah. So my understanding was that we would scaffold it. So there was an initial piece where we'd have a conversation around building some of those structures that were mentioned, and then from there we would build out kind of what Trustee Hernandez is talking about. So I don't think it's an either or. My recollection, if I could speak, is that it was a combination of the two. So I will entertain a motion to accept I'll entertain a motion on the presentation.
I move approval of the individual that came to speak to us, of organizing ourselves, and we can identify that we do not want that particular book that she talked about, but that we want to identify with the parents group of goals as a board.
That's not what they're doing.
Yeah. So do I have a motion on the floor? Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. So I think we're going to need a roll call vote. Maya?
Trustee Hack?
Yes.
Trustee Hernandez?
No.
Trustee Rocha?
Yes.
Vice President Lathan?
Absolutely not.
President Lewis?
Yes. Okay. So the motion carries on a split vote.
And perhaps we might want to think about having a meeting ourselves prior to that person coming so we can give them clarification of what we're looking for. So we're all on the same page.
But if you give them clarification and they can't do it, that's why I'm like, you're asking people to do something that.
Is.
Okay.
So, yeah. So the motion carries. So thank you for that discussion. Resolution, number 11, resolution for first reading. There are none. Number 12, resolutions for immediate action. Resolution 2023-24, 29, authorizing provisional internship permit, or PIP.
I will prove that because we've gone through the PIP.
Well, just open it for discussion first.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Any discussion on item 12? Okay. Trustee Lathan? Oh.
Yes.
You pulled your mic. I thought you were going to have a comment. Okay. All right. So I will entertain a motion.
I move approval.
All right. So I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Motion on the floor, properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? The motion carries. All right. Item 13, resolutions for second reading and action. There are none. Item 14, board policies for first reading. There are two. Revised Board Policy 5126, awards for achievement, and B, revised board bylaw 9270, conflict of interest. So these are for general consumption, so there's no action on these.
I do want to note that the board has seen revisions from board members on the awards for achievement, and it normally would come back for second read, but it's coming back for first read because in tandem, while the board was working, CSBA also came out with some recommendations that we thought, well, might as well bring it back for a first reading if you do have any input before we bring it back.
Yes, and that also honored what I asked, which was to give us all
Yes.
of the options. 14A, I do have a comment. I appreciate the revisions to policy 14A, which is the awards for achievement. So thank you to Trustee Hernandez and Trustee Rocha for working on that as well. It's definitely moving us towards ensuring equity in terms of how we honor students for their achievements. And the accountability portion of it says the superintendent will have a full list of students in the prior 12 months. School is only 10 months, so that would kind of be later. So I just wondered if it would be advantageous to have a list prior to the last board meeting so that we can actually honor all of the students at that time and not wait until the next year. Some of those kids might be, graduated and gone. So just curious if the language, if you all agree that the language could be updated.
Yeah, if the board would like to go that direction, it makes sense.
Is there any objection?
Just a nodding.
Fine.
I mean, I think that's a separate intention from here. I mean, because the intention here is the 12-month report is for our analysis, not for the recognition of students. That's something that we would still do, I would hope so, separately from that.
So how would we, if we get the information 12 months after they have gotten the recognition, it's good that we have the information to analyze and to see, what students are being awarded for, what are their achievements, but in what ways can we share that information? Does that make sense? Because then it's kind of like the test scores. It's an autopsy. It's past the fact.
Right.
So I'm just wondering if we get it earlier, if we can do we might be creative with what we can do with the data when we get it and not wait until the following year or the summer.
What about something like quarterly or every 6 months or
in May?
Every semester? Yeah, something.
Yeah, just before the end of the school year. For me, that would be helpful because we might want to do something with the information.
Is there any objection to having it 10 months as opposed to 12?
Yep.
It's fine.
Trustee Hernandez, would that change anything? Are there any adverse?
I just think it creates a little bit of ambiguity in terms of like it assumes the academic year, but there's also students over the summer that may get different kinds of awards and things. And so I think the 12 months makes it clear the timeline that we'd be looking them on. That's my only concern. I think, if we want to do it at different rates, I think that's fine too as well.
Great, thank you.
So what does that mean?
So
10 or 12?
10.
10 months? Do you have any objection, Tristan?
No, that's fine.
Okay. So 10 months? Yep.
Okay.
All right. So next is 15, board policies for second reading and action. There's one, revised board policy 6152.1, placement in mathematics courses.
Yeah, so this was postponed from the last board meeting, and so it's being brought back for the board to approve the revisions.
Okay. Trustee Hack, any conversation or thoughts?
No.
Trustee Hernandez? Trustee Lathan, Dr. Lathan?
No.
Trustee Rocha?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. All right, so I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
All right, so I have a motion on the floor to approve.
I'll second.
Do I have a second? Oh, I'm sorry. Motion on the floor properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? The motion carries.
Okay.
All right. 16, items for general information. Item 16A, 2022-23 annual developer fees report for public review.
Yes, this is just for information, and it reports the annual developer fees, both received and spent within Fund 25, and then it will come back in December for approval.
Okay. All right. Item 16B, quarterly report on Williams uniform complaints.
This is also for information, so this is from the first period, which was July through September. We did receive one complaint from Park Middle School with regards to their HVAC system, and it has been resolved. So that's part of the report.
Okay. All right, so item 17, future agenda items from board members. Trustee Rocha.
You know, I'd like to have a report again, or an update on the busing situation. I know they were doing a report as to how we were going to take a look at the future funding for it, and also electric buses. Where do we fit in that? And if there's some grants that are being scheduled.
Okay. Yeah, Trustee Dr. Lathan. Oh, you want me to come back to you, or?
No. We already have the special education independent evaluation that will be on the November agenda. And then also Educational Equity and Excellence Committee. I think that'll be on the November 8th agenda as well. And then Trustee Hernandez and I have talked extensively about exit interviews and demographic data, so having that conversation at some point. And also the TK student ratio, I've heard that a couple times tonight. So most things are already going to be on the agenda. Just wanted to make it public that those things will be on there. And then adding TK on there.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Trustee Hernandez?
Yeah, I'd like to have a discussion about talking about project labor agreements as related to the bond.
Trustee Hack?
I'm looking forward to the next meeting.
Next meeting. Okay, so just the two that I'll bring back up is ROTC. So where are we with that program? And then, so the ROTC program, and then also, I do want to reiterate the need to have a conversation around hiring a grant writer for the district. All right, so item 18. Additional comments which exceeded the first 30-minute session. We have one from Dominique King.
And that's up to the board whether or not we didn't exceed.
Yeah,
So it's just procedural, but the board in the past has gone forward, so.
Well, thank you for letting me talk. Hello, board. God willing, I'll make it to the next meeting when special education comes up. But just as an educational advocate in this area, I really wanted to highlight something that I found concerning. When we talk about the numbers are decreasing when it calls for IEEs, I have a caseload right now of about 7 parents that are all special needs. And the fact that a lot of them don't even know that IEEs are an option, the fact that when they sit in their IEP meetings, they are not told about what all their options may be. There is unfortunately, a disconnect that is happening within our schools between our principals and special education teachers. And I don't know if that requires ongoing training, if that requires a conversation, but just as an advocate, when I sit in these spaces and I'm talking to these parents, what I notice is a lot of these problems could be fixed if teachers were aware of what they could bring to the table for families, if principals were aware that they sit at the helm of their children, of the special education needs team, if parents were aware of their rights and how to advocate for themselves. So I just want to acknowledge that while those numbers may be seen as decreasing, there's just a lack of education and a lack of an output of resource. So hopefully that's something that comes up at the next meeting. But like I said, God willing, I'll make it to the next one. But if I don't, I really want that to be something that's looked at and discussed. So thank you for giving me this time.
Thank you.
All right, 19, reports, comments from board members. Trustee Hernandez, we can start with you.
So I just have a few updates to share since our last meeting. I was able to attend a conference for school board members in Bend, Oregon, that are trying to create more anti-racist policy. It was a really great group. We got to dive into both our own district data, both into district nationwide, and just continuing, again, my learning as continuing to become a better and better trustee, because I don't think there's ever a limit that anyone reaches, and we can always be doing more to become better, to learn more, and to better serve our students. As was shared, I got to visit Fremont Elementary School during Indigenous Peoples Day and read My Powerful Hair, which was a really great experience. And in particular, I think one thing that I enjoyed a lot about that experience is after reading that book, I got to talk with a student there that was a new arrival and hadn't quite, still trying to grapple with understanding English, and got to hear about his experience in the classroom. And it was just, it's something that I'm sure we all know, but I think every time we have these experiences, it reinforces the need, it reinforces our thoughts and the urgency of these things. But it was just so striking how he knew absolutely everything that was going on. He talked about how math is like something like I get, and, I understood what's going on in the story. I just can't say it. And I think that was an experience to remember that, we have these students that understanding and learning and understanding the content isn't really the issue. It's just about how do they show that to us a lot of the time. And so that was a really, great reminder, and again, keeps me energized in the work that we're doing here. And then lastly, I've now started my graduate program at Stanford at the School of Education, which I think has been really great to continue to, continue my learning as a trustee, as someone who's trying to learn more about education, who's trying to create, new relationships, networks, and find ways to bring the resources of a world-class institution back to our school district. So that's been great, except for now my commute is from here to San Jose area, which is significantly worse than from here to Sacramento. So that's the one downside here. But other than that, I think it's been a really great experience so far, and I'm looking forward to finding ways to, again, bring that learning back to our school district. And then lastly, kind of on that vein, I thought this was a really good book to share for today. It's called What Do You Do with an Idea? And it's written by Kobe Yamada. And it's really, and I'm going to spoil the ending for you on the last page. The thing that we do with an idea is we change the world. And that is how that book ends. And the book really advocates for how do you nourish an idea that may not be something that people have seen before, that may be something different, that may be unique, that maybe is unwelcome to people at times, and how do we nourish that in a way such that it impacts and changes the world? And so I've been thinking a lot about that as I've been getting to talk with other school board members across the country, been getting to engage more with students here, and again and continue my own educational journey and trying to find ways to bring these ideas back here in a way that's going to help our students. So this book will find its way into the school district, and I think I'll put this out there as a pathway that I hadn't thought about before. But when I went to go read that book, My Powerful Hair, I gave it to the classroom. So if anyone ever sees a book that they like and want me to visit and drop it off, or you want the book, just reach out to me. And my goal is to get these into the hands of students and our staff and teachers. So anything that helps facilitate that, I'm trying to make sure that these get to students. But that's all I have.
Thank you, Trustee Hernandez. Trustee Hack?
I just love going through this district and walking on school sites and seeing bus drivers, seeing crossing guards, principals, women, whatever, going crazy, and the kids just enjoying themselves with good weather. That's fantastic. So that's always kind of cool to be on sites. Also, we got something in our Friday board letter, about 10 pages of all the different sites and what's going on at every site. I've been in this district since I was 23, so it's been a while. I have never seen a document like that. That was fantastic. So whoever wrote that, thank you. It just gives you a very comprehensive view of what the heck goes on physically at school sites to make them stay up. It's great, so cool.
Trustee Latham?
Yes, so I visited quite a few schools. Black Diamond, and I'll go really quickly, but Black Diamond Middle School was one. I met with each of the principals at the school. We walked classrooms. We talked about their vision, what they want. I'm an educator, so this is like my love to understand what our kids are actually doing. Is one thing for people to tell you, and it's another thing to actually see it in action. So Dr. Bafico, which is the principal of Black Diamond Middle School, she's new in our district, has a very clear vision for student success. And she's starting with staff mindset. And she has extremely high expectations for students and staff and strategies to support adults on campus to reach those expectations, and I saw that clearly when I was there. Diablo Vista Elementary School, I went during the reading block, which is called WIN, W-I-N, and that stands for What I Need Time. And students were assigned to small groups where they were working with teachers, including, and this also included the classroom teachers, so like intervention teachers and the classroom teachers on specific reading skills. And the day I visited, the focus for most groups were phonics instruction, and I even videoed. They allowed me to. I asked permission and posted it on social media. And the kids were working in groups on, the older kids were working on consonant blends. So for those of you who don't know, don't worry about it. That's me nerding out. And the small groups were like kids of 5 to 7, so I thought that was really good because it's, small groups and they get the more immediate attention. Dozier Libby, the medical ethics class was fantastic. It was focused on this particular class, students with people with disabilities and the ethics around that in the medical field, and they were reading a book about it. It was like a 300-page book. And then I went to a public health class as well. There were some concerns around parking, but I'll bring that up at a later time. Or traffic flow, I would say. Park Middle School, I was able to meet the full admin team, walk classrooms, and they're working on full school AVID implementation and some other areas as well. So that was nice. They were working on one class, the 6th grade class was working on horror stories, which was fun for 6th graders because they had all this gooey, gory stuff they wanted to write about. And they were very interested and engaged in that. And then lastly, Deer Valley High School met with Principal McLennan, who is also a new principal in our district, but not a new principal. And her focus is really to build community and relationship and to really bring people together and reimagine what Deer Valley could look like. And so she just went through some activities she's going to do with her staff so that they can calibrate around like a portrait of a graduate. What do they want all their kids to walk away with? So I was very pleased with that.
Trustee Rocha?
Oh, okay. Actually, there was 3 things I wanted to bring up. First of all, I did go to the ELAC meeting over at Marsh for the reclassification of their students, and I was just impressed. 50 parents were present, and Spanish-speaking parents that were there, and it's amazing. And the amount of things that they're doing in that class, will show you that school and what the future is and what the principal's kind of directing. It's just the involvement of the parents. They had new parents that were selected. I also went over to Fremont, and Fremont was speaking directly to the parents there, the Spanish-speaking parents, because I'm spreading the word. Bond issue's coming. We need your help. We need you to be involved, and we need you to be aware. And they were telling me right then and there that they were already had voted on that little thing that you have, yeah. And they were spreading the word that they wanted their school to be covered by all the new things that might happen. So that was exciting. And of course, Dia de los Muertos is happening in most of the schools, so just keep an eye on it. I don't know that we are told often what schools are doing it. I know Fremont's having theirs in November. I think it's Friday. I'm not sure. I don't know the date. I'm sorry.
November 2nd, Thursday.
Thursday, thank you. I knew it was there. And it's at the cafeteria, and they're having all the altars, and then they have all of the presentation by the teachers, and they have a nice setup of multicultural, actually, in there. And then I'm so sorry for Prospects and their freezer issue. Well, the issue is that they could have the kitchen going and having their lunch. I'm sorry, maybe I should have talked to you privately, but I'm just saying I'm sorry about the ability for them to be able to do the person coming in to cook the meals and stuff and have actually the students there have an opportunity. But it's the freezer area. And I should have asked you this question. We used to, in the old days, have a department where one had a carpentry and then one was electrical and one was, and they were specialists in the classified, in the classified, or should I say, where we have all our employees. But haven't asked if that is still ongoing.
Yes.
Do we have those departments, right?
I think they're more general. I think
many of the classifications are more generalized, but yes, there are specific classifications, welder, painter, electrician.
And I guess we just don't
HVAC.
have the right individuals for that particular freezer.
I don't know anything about the freezer, but I'm happy to check and I'll
I'm
let
glad
the
I
whole
brought it
board
up.
know, because now I'm very curious, so thank you.
I'm glad I brought it up. Thank you. I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's just that I happened to visit, and that happened, the thing that came up to me was that issue. And you should see, they have the place, it's like a circus. They have pictures of names of all their teachers, and it's a circus atmosphere, and it's so fun. Anyway, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all. A couple things. So I am, as I mentioned about a million times, I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and we have a number of different leadership programs for students. And so over the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple leadership sessions, and I've led conversations with young folks around leadership development, how to get engaged in the community, and kind of what that looks like. That happened a few times. And then I also, in all my spare time, I also teach at UC Berkeley. And so I teach in a couple different capacities. One is in the Haas School of Business, and we teach leadership communications. Another one is that we work, and it's called Berkeley Executive Coaching Institute. So effectively what we do is we go into organizations and work with them on how to develop policies, processes, and structures to decrease conflict, problem solve, and then strategic plan. The reason I mentioned that, the students in those programs are very much interested in education. So I've been working with having conversations around bringing some of the resources. I can't name the organizations by name, but you're very familiar with most of the organizations that my students come from. So that's kind of, in all my spare time, what I've been doing.
So you know the importance then of having a framework and a model.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you teach.
So I do have my master's degree is in educational leadership. So we have an entire semester specifically on that. So yes, I do. So thank you for bringing that up. All right, so thank you for that. Item 20 is future meeting information, November 8th. And December 13th are our next board meetings upcoming. And with that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move approval.
All right.
I'll second.
All right. Moved and properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.